I'll be doing a study on human reproductive system, and as earlier stated, this is going to be a revision material as we prepare for the upcoming exams. Now, to start with, I'll be looking at the role of meiosis, mitosis, and fertilization in human reproduction. So, let's start by looking at meiosis. How does it contribute to human reproduction? Meiosis creates genetically diverse haploid gametes, that is, sperm cells and ovum. Since reproduction is involved in the process, we are going to need a sperm and then an ovum so that when fertilization occurs, we will be able to form our zygote. But then after meiosis and after getting the gametes, what do you do with it? So the next important step will be fertilization. Fertilization restores the diploid state by fusing gametes. So meiosis gave us the sperm cells and ovum. Now fertilization will actually fuse the two together, and the fusion between the sperm cells and an ovum will lead to the formation of a zygote. When the zygote is formed, what will be the next step? The next step will be mitosis. How does it contribute to human reproduction? Mitosis allows the fertilized zygote to grow and then to develop into a multicellular organism. So these three processes are very important. This cycle ensures life continues whilst maintaining genetic stability and then furthermore diversity across generation. This should make us aware that meiosis, fertilization, and mitosis, they are actually the fundamental building blocks or the pillars on which the production of life is actually established. Now let's move on and look at how these three cycles or these three processes are connected to the cycles. So here we are within the biology, we understand that for you to reproduce, you have to be sexually mature. So we have two sexually matured individuals here. They have actually reached puberty and they have even grown above it. So let's see how they form part of the cycle of life. So the individual you are seeing on your screen, they are ascribed with the numerical value of 2n. 2n means they are diploid. As you're about to see, life begins from a diploid cell and then it carries on within the cycle. So what would the diploid cell do? The diploid cell will undergo gametogenesis because that's where everything starts. But then we need to understand that gametogenesis occurs by meiosis. Without meiosis, there will be no gametogenesis. And gametogenesis by meiosis in males is what we call spermatogenesis. As you will later get to know, there are two types of gametogenesis. And as you already know, there are two types of it. We have spermatogenesis in male, which leads to the formation of the male gametes, the sperm, which is produced in the testes. And then gametogenesis in female is called oogenesis. During oogenesis, the female gamete is produced inside the ovary. We need to know meiosis produces gametes for reproduction. Without gametes, there will be no reproduction. So, if you look at it again, you realize that these gametes are labeled as N. N is half of 2N. N represent haploid. N means one set of chromosomes, making it haploid. So you have a sperm cell, you have an ovum. What do you do with it? You have to fertilize it. Okay, so you fertilize it, that is, you fuse them together. When they are fertilized, remember the sperm is N, And then the ovum too is N. N plus N will give you 2N. 2N is diploid. It means you have two sets of chromosomes. So once fertilization has taken place, the next structure that will form after the arrow is the zygote. That we are following the arrow on your screen. So the next structure that is formed, or the next cell, a special kind of cell that is formed, is called a zygote. And the zygote is labeled 2N, meaning it is diploid. The zygote is just one single cell, hence we call it unicellular. So what will the zygote do? The zygote will then undergo mitosis. Mitosis brings about growth. That means the unicellular zygote will undergo mitosis or will multiply to produce millions of cells that will form the organism or the living organism. So here we have the child. The child will have to grow by mitosis and will keep on growing. During mitosis, cells are produced, and then in that process, it brings about growth and repair. And mitosis will keep on going on until the person or the child becomes fully matured for reproduction to occur. So these three processes, that is meiosis, mitosis, and fertilization, they are very critical and very important in the human life cycle. Well, as we approach this topic, there are some fundamental aspects that I will want to share with you as we prepare for the exams. They are very critical and very important, and you need to know about the overview of the topic on human reproduction. So, this topic involves labeling of diagrams, and whenever you are labeling diagrams, you are advised to stick to the instructions in the questions. Do not create your own questions in your mind as you go ahead studying. So, we need to know the following diagrams are always displayed in every exam. Anything related to human reproduction will also always involve parts of the male and female reproductive system. So it is something we should expect and look forward to. Secondly, in some cases, as you prepare for the exam, you're supposed to know about the parts of the sperm cell and the ovum. You have to make sure you know how to label, how to draw the sperm cell and the ovum, and then also how to label the male and the female reproductive system. You shouldn't forget the amniotic egg. This part or this aspect is related to reproductive strategies in vertebrates. So, in as much as you are studying how to label the parts of the male and the female reproductive system, as well as the sperm cell and the ovum, include the amniotic egg also. Then there is this thing you normally find on whilst marking. You realize that we have questions such as uh, state the letter and the name. They give you a diagram and then they ask you state the letter and the name. In most cases, you realize that the learner will just state the letter. If the letter is A, the learner will just put the letter A there, but will ignore the name because stating the letter and the name gives you 2 marks. If you give us the name and you don't state the letter, you're gonna lose 1 mark, and every mark is important. So you are advised to make sure you don't forget to do as the question demands. If you have to state the letter and the name, do both of them so that you can get the maximum marks. Well, now let's look at the description of the functions of some of the labeled parts. In as much as you have to label parts of the human reproductive system and some other special structures, we are also required to know the functions. So we need to know the parts and the functions of the male and female reproductive system, which is very critical. And then we need to also know the parts and functions of the sperm cell or the ovum. I think I will say and the ovum because they can bring both in exams, and or either way, they can bring one or the other. So you need to know their functions. You need to know the diagram. You have to know the differences between uh, a diagram representing the male reproductive system and the diagram representing the female reproductive system, as well as the sperm cell and the ovum, and then also how to label, and then finally how to state the functions. These are stuff you need to memorize, and then you need to synthesize to appreciate the overall function of the system. Now, the description of the following processes cannot be ignored. They are constantly appearing in every major exams. Processes like spermatogenesis, if you check your examination guide, it is listed for you. That is how you're supposed to write it. Description means write it as it is. You don't provide explanation unless the question demands that you do so. So we have spermatogenesis. And then we have a negative feedback mechanism between FSH and progesterone. It is part of the menstrual cycle, and I'll be dealing with it as we move on. And then we have oogenesis. Spermatogenesis goes with oogenesis. And then lastly, which is not the least, but we should also include the process of fertilization, the entire process, complete process. So here are the four possible uh, areas you might be required to describe, and such questions carries a lot of marks, mostly be minimum 4 to a maximum of 6 marks. It can even be more. So these areas are written directly in your examination guide. They are in your textbook, especially spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Make sure you know them. You can write them as it is. You have to memorize them. Stick to the textbook. All right, so here we are. We have the male and the female reproductive system, and this is how they are represented. And for the female reproductive system, we are looking at it from the side view, whereas the male reproductive system, we are looking at it from the front view. Now, in the examination guide, there are some parts that needs to be labeled, and those are the parts that we need to know. So, we need to actually develop a skill or a method that will help you to learn this thing very well. Whenever you are dealing with reproductive system, be ready to identify different parts, such carries low marks. Okay, these are low order type of question, and then you need to state the functions. So you have to know the part, you have to know how the part looks like structurally, and then what it does. What it does is what we call the functions. And then lastly, which is very important, which carries a lot of marks, that one deals with providing an explanation on the effect or consequence of a damaged organ on fertility. Fertility here deals with the ability to reproduce. So, if a part is damaged, how will it affect the person's ability to reproduce? And that is how the exams you are going to be writing is structured. So let us look at the male reproductive system. This is it. This is the front view, and those are the parts you need to know. If you check your examination guide, there are a specific number of structures you are supposed to know. So these are the parts and the functions of these parts that you're supposed to know. It starts with the testes. We have the epididymis. We have the vas deferens, seminal vesicle, prostate gland, corpus gland, penis, and then the urethra. So they are just only 8 parts of the male reproductive system that you need to know. These are the functions. So I have displayed here the parts, the structure, the description of the structure, and the functions. So if you take the testes, starting from the top, if you take the testes, for example, it is oval shaped glands suspended in the scrotum. And what does it do? It produces sperm cells and the hormone testosterone. So that is all that you need to know. I'm going to advise you to spend time memorizing the functions, because in most cases you have to write the functions as it is. The scrotum is just a skin sac that holds the testis. What does it do? That's the function. It protects the testis and holds the testis outside the body at 2 degrees Celsius lower than the body temperature. And it goes on and on. If you check also the seminal gland, you realize that, let's go straight to the functions. It produces a nutrient rich fluid that provides energy for the sperm cells. And then the corpus gland it produces mucus that helps with the movement of sperm cells. Sorry, we have prostate gland also. It produces alkaline fluid to neutralize vaginal acids, which would kill sperms. So you have to know all these parts, they work together to enable the male to reproduce. If one part is damaged, the overall function of the system will be compromised. So the individual functions of the part contributes to the whole function of the system. And that will take us to an aspect that we're going to explore. But I will admonish you and encourage you to master these three specialized glands. That is seminal glands, Cowper's gland, and prostate gland. Because from time to time, questions are set on them. At least they normally pick one of them and then they include it in any exams. Then you must also include something which are actually connected to the male reproductive system, because the seminal gland, Cowper's gland, and the prostate gland are what we call the accessory glands. So most of the time, one is actually selected and included in any exam, in addition to anything from the testes, scrotum, epididymis, vas deferens, or the urethra. So this area demands your attention. It demands that you memorize. It demands memorization because you just state the functions as it is. And you can only write the functions as it is if you can spend time memorizing and you couple it with the diagram. So you need to learn the diagram. You don't have to necessarily draw. If you can draw, that will be a plus for you. But if you can't, just get a correct textbook and make sure you practice labeling the functions as many as you can. And then you memorize the functions and try and state them, because in exams you'll be required to state the functions, or they will state the functions for you and it is now left for you to connect, okay, which part is responsible for that function. Okay, so the other side that I am mostly interested in deals with what is on your screen. That is how to explain the consequence of a damaged part, or we can say if there is a disorder in a part. If a part is damaged, how would that affect the fertility of the person? So your ability to do that depends on your understanding of the question. We need to look at the approach. How do you approach such a question? Such questions carries minimum 3 to 4 marks based on the numerous questions I've come across. So you need to adopt a strategy that will allow you to get the maximum out of the marks. So this is what you do. Anytime there's a question demanding that you explain the consequence of a damaged part, all you have to do is to negate or write the opposite statement of the functions or the function. And then with respect to the damaged part, and then how do you negate a statement? How do you write the opposite, or how do you put a statement in the negative, or how do you write the opposite of a particular of a given statement? And this is what you do. It is simply by introducing the phrase will not, or simply the single word won't. So just will not or won't will change the meaning of a statement, or it will change the meaning of the functions. So let's see how we're going to apply this. And your ability to apply this can give you the marks that are allocated, or that is allocated to that particular question. So let's look at a case, a simple case scenario here. So one example, explain the effect of explain the effect of a blocked sperm duct on male fertility. So the question is demanding that we explain the effect of a blocked sperm duct on on male fertility. That's if the sperm duct is blocked, how will it affect male fertility? So before you can answer it, you must have first written down, or you should be able to know the functions of that particular part in question. What is the sperm duct supposed to do? So the sperm duct here is supposed to transport sperms from the epididymis to the urethra. But then the question is saying, explain the consequence if it is blocked. And the consequence here is linked to male fertility. Fertility means your ability to reproduce. So the question wants you to tell it or tell us, explain the consequence or the effect of a blocked sperm duct on a person's ability to give birth. So Like I said earlier, to do so, you have to know the functions of the sperm duct, which is actually on your screen. The sperm duct is there to transport sperm from the epididymis to the urethra. Hence, if it is blocked, what's going to happen? So this is how you answer in exams. The sperm cells will not be able to transport. Okay, the sperm cells will not be transported. That is, the sperm cells will not be transported into the urethra. Okay, that is what the sperm duct is supposed to do. So because it's blocked, it will not be able to transport the sperms into the urethra. That will give you 1 mark. Now, how do you get the rest of the mark? Mostly, such a question will attract 3 marks. So, to get the rest of the question, you have to recognize the effect on fertility. Fertility means your ability to reproduce. And what do you need the sperms for in reproduction? You need the sperms for fertilization, because for you to reproduce, fertilization will have to occur. Without fertilization, there will be no reproduction. If you don't fertilize the ovum, or if there's no sperm to fertilize the ovum, there will be no pregnancy. Hence, your ability for a person to be pregnant, fertilization will have to first occur. But then here is a case: the tube through which the sperm will travel is blocked. Okay, it has been blocked. Hence, the sperm cells will not be transported into the urethra. Therefore, we will say fertilization will not occur. Once you say fertilization will not occur, you get an additional 1 mark, giving you 2 marks. So without even completing it, you already have 2 marks. So because fertilization won't occur, what will be the final effect? So we say, hence the man will not be able to reproduce. Another word or another way of putting the statement that is into bracket is the man will be infertile, because the question was about fertility. So uh, no sperms means no fertilization, because the sperms couldn't travel to the urethra since it is blocked, and fertilization will occur since there are no sperms to fertilize the ovum, and because there are no sperms and there is no fertilization, there will be no reproduction. Hence, we say the man will not reproduce. All right, so those are some of the ways by which you approach. These are some of the ways you can approach questions demanding that you explain the consequence of a damaged part. And you apply the same inspiration to explain the consequence of the damaged part of any of the organs or the accessory glands connected to the male reproductive system, even and as well as also to the female reproductive system. Now here we have the cross section through the seminiferous tubule of a testis. So that is a seminiferous tubules, and then it consists of so many parts. But then over there, that is where spermatogenesis occurs. And then over here, we have the germinal epithelial cells. Okay, these are the cells that will have to develop into sperm cells. And then the germinal epithelial cells will now develop, it will grow into spermatids. And for them to actually develop into spermatids, for them to grow, for them to actually mature through spermatogenesis, they're going to require nutrients. And these nutrients are supplied by the Sertoli cells or the Sertoli cells, which are also found inside the seminiferous tubules. So these nutrients will enrich the developing spermatids until they mature to become sperm cells. Now, the testis is not only the site for spermatogenesis; it is there as it serves as a site for the production of the hormone testosterone. So over here, we have the cells of Leydig. What do they do here? The cells of Leydig are there to secrete testosterone. You are not required to uh, learn how to draw this into label. You just have to know what I just displayed or what I just demonstrated is simply the process of spermatogenesis. All right, then we have the epididymis there, okay, where the developing sperms will be actually stored until they reach maturity. Now, let's look at the functions of testosterone. So, testosterone performs the following functions. It is involved in the development of the male secondary sexual characteristics. That is one. And secondly, it's involved in stimulating the maturation of sperm cells. So, when we talk about knowing the functions, Here are they. These are some of the things we need to know. And then we go on to why the testis hangs outside the body. So this is an explanatory question. So the reason is because the optimum temperature for sperm production is 2 to 3 degrees lower than the normal body temperature. If the temperature in the scrotum is high, it interferes with the quality of the sperm, resulting in male fertility. So, by having the testis suspended in the scrotum, the temperature of the testis can be adjusted. That is when it's hot, when the weather is hot, or when the weather is cold. So, what goes on is that the testis will move closer to the body in cold condition when it's very cold because the general body is warmer than the testis. So in cold conditions, the testis moves closer to the body. But then during warm conditions or when it's hot, it moves away from the body since higher temperature affects the quality of sperm's production. And the movement of the testis and the scrotum allows for regulation of temperature. It is necessary for us to know that we are supposed to think outside the box to look at situations that will demand that you explain why the testis hangs outside the body. For example, wearing tight clothing can uh, increase the temperature of the testis. Spending longer hours or longer periods in hot bath or in a jacuzzi can also cause the testicular temperature to rise. If the testis gets hotter or if the temperature rises above normal, the quality of sperms produced will be very low, or it will lead to the formation of poor sperms. That means their quality is going to be so low. So you need to look at this question holistically. It's very important. It's an integral part of every examination. All right, now let's go on to the female reproductive system. And just like the male reproductive system, the female reproductive system also follows the same pattern. You can have the diagrams in two views. You can have it in a side view. You can also have it in the front view. And in each case, you're supposed to know the different parts. And the parts are actually listed here. If you check your examination guide, there's a specific number of parts that you're supposed to know. And you're supposed to know the functions of these parts as well. And that demands you're supposed to study together with any past question or any question or activity displaying the diagram. And if there's any material with the diagrams of the female reproductive system, that would be a good learning material for you. You're supposed to know how the fallopian tube looks like. You have to know how the vagina looks like in drawing. You have to know how the ovary also looks like. You're supposed to know their functions as well. So there are a few things you're supposed to know about the female reproductive system. We have the ovary, fallopian tube, the uterus lined by the endometrium. We have the cervix, we have vagina with the external opening, and we have the vulva. These are the only few parts you're supposed to know. You don't have to learn anything outside here. Make sure you can reason outside the box in approaching questions related to these parts. You're supposed to know the functions. So here are the functions. If you look carefully, we have the ovaries, we have the structure, a description of the structure, and it functions. Mostly, the concentration is mostly are on there. The functions. So you need to know the functions of each part, like the uterus. What does it do? It houses and protects the embryo, sorry, and the fetus during pregnancy. Then we look at another part like the fallopian tube. What does it do? It transports the ovum from the ovary to the uterus, and that is the site. It is also the site of fertilization. We have the vulva. What does it do? It protects the entrance to the vagina. So you need to know, like I earlier on explained or elaborated on, you need to know the diagram, the parts, and its functions. And then we need to also look at the other side of it, the other side um, of the questioning model, which deals with how to explain the consequence of a damaged part. How to explain the consequence of a damaged part, which is the same as explain the consequence if there is a disorder in a part. If one part is damaged, it affects the overall function of the system. The system is larger than the part, and the individual parts they work together to allow the system to function. The purpose of the system is to ensure reproduction. The purpose of the whole system is to make fertilization possible. That is one. And two, to ensure fertilization. So if a part is damaged, it means there will be no fertilization. If there is no fertilization, it means there will be no reproduction. So those two key foundational principles are keen to ensuring that reproduction occur. For reproduction to occur, one more time, fertilization will have to take place. That is one. Two, secondly, reproduction will now occur once fertilization has taken place. So let's look at a real case scenario. Explain the effect of a blocked fallopian tube on fertility. Explain the effect of a blocked fallopian tube on fertility. So over here, before you can answer the question, before you can approach it, you first have to know what is the function of the fallopian tube in the particular in the system. What is it supposed to do? What does it contribute in the female reproductive system? And then our explanation is supposed to address the issue of fertility. Okay, fertility deals with the ability to reproduce. How will a blocked fallopian tube affect the ability to reproduce? So the answer will be as follows. Remember, the fallopian tube transports ovum from the ovary to the uterus, and it is also the site of fertilization. Hence, if it is blocked, the ovum will not be transported into the uterus, meaning it won't be able to perform its function anymore. And because the ovum will not be transported into the uterus, fertilization will not occur. Now, writing that will give you an additional mark. That is 2. And hence, the woman will not be able to reproduce. So we say the woman will be infertile. So, in a nutshell, that is how you approach the concept uh, human reproduction, dealing with diagrams, labeling part, stating functions, and explaining the consequence of a damaged part. All you have to do when you're explaining is to write the opposite of the functions, or you have to negate the functions of that part, and you do so by including or putting in the statement or the phrase will not. Just state that it will not be able to do what it's supposed to do. You have to know what it's supposed to do. That is the functions. So your ability to explain depends on your knowledge of the functions. If you don't know about the functions, you won't be able to um, explain. All right, so let's look at another case scenario, another scenario here. Consequences of multiple ovaries. This time, nothing is damaged except that the person is born with multiple ovaries. We know the average female has only two ovaries. Under certain rare situations, some females are born with two pairs of ovaries. That is, four ovaries. So if a person is born with four ovaries, let's look at the question here. Explain the implication for the human population size if the four ovaries undergo ovulation at the same time. That is, if the four ovaries release an ovum at the same time. If an ovum is released from these four ovums, what will be the consequence? This is the answer here. This is how you explain. This will lead. This will result in multiple birth due to multiple ova. So you have four ova, all of them will be fertilized, and all of them will turn into a human being or will develop into a zygote, eventually becoming humans. So that means the person will produce four children at a time. As a result of multiple ovulation, so the answer is that this will result in multiple births due to multiple ova as a result of multiple ovulation. He said, continue to say, there will be an increased chance of fertilization. And then we end by saying, which will lead to an increased population. So there you have it. This is how you approach it. Here, nothing is damaged. except that things are abnormal. The person's reproductive system is slightly abnormal, positively but not negatively. So we want to know the consequence on the human population size. Let's go on to the next concept, which deals with puberty. So under puberty, we need to know the meaning. Puberty is a period during which males and females reach sexual maturity. You have to know the definition, is very important. And it usually begins between the ages of 11 to 15. And sometimes it can even be much earlier, and it depends on the individual. During puberty, sex hormones are produced. So we are going to learn about those hormones. And then these hormones stimulate gametogenesis and sexual maturity. So we are going to explore. And then during that same period, sexual characteristics are also developed. That is, the secondary sexual characteristics also develop. Okay, so still on puberty, what are secondary sexual characteristics? Secondary sexual characteristics are the specific characteristics that distinguish male and female individuals. Secondary sexual characteristics are the specific characteristics that distinguish male and female individuals. They develop during puberty and lead to the attraction between the sexes. And the purpose of the opposite sexes are having an attraction or attracting each other is to ensure that reproduction occurs. Because before a man and a woman, according to the biology, according to the science, before a man and a woman can reproduce, they have to be sexually attracted to each other. So for them to be sexually attractive, they have to develop what is called the secondary sexual characteristics, the features or the phenotypes that will make them sexually appealing to each other. The hormone responsible for secondary sexual characteristics in women, not female, because we have female girls and female women. Women are matured girls. When girls mature, they actually develop into a woman. So the hormone responsible for secondary sexual characteristics in women is called estrogen. So this hormone turns a girl into a woman. And then the hormone responsible for doing the same, that is responsible for secondary sexual characteristics in men, not boys, because we have female men and then we have male men, sorry, and then we have male boys. Here, puberty when a person reaches puberty, we have actually reached the stage of manhood. So the hormone that will turn a boy into a man is what is called testosterone. The hormone responsible for secondary sexual characteristics in men, that is called testosterone. So, also in exams, you're supposed to know the characteristics of a male and a female uh, in puberty. So, if a male reaches puberty, what are some of the characteristics? So, that is what you have on the screen. Male sex hormone testosterone is produced. That is during puberty. Once you reach puberty, you produce the male sex hormone. When a female also reaches puberty, the female hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, are produced. And then we have features such as the growth of hair around the scrotum. And then same applies to the female growth of hair around the vulva, that is the pubic hair. And then growth of hair in the armpit. We also have the same growth of hair in the armpit. Growth of hair on the face. We don't have the same in female. Larynx enlarges or the voice becomes deeper. We don't have that case in female. Muscles enlarge and the shoulders become wider. On the other side, the hips becomes wider and fat is deposited below the skin. In the case of males, when they reach puberty, the penis and the testes enlarge and they become larger. And in the case of the females, the breast also develops and it becomes quite larger, not too large. but quite large. So there are different ways of approaching this. This is another diagrammatic representation uh, of the secondary social characteristics in male and female in puberty or uh, after reaching puberty. So it's still the same as the previous one. You need to know the characteristics. Now let's go on to gametogenesis. Now, gametogenesis is an area or an aspect that deals with describing a process. And so we're going to look at how to describe the process of oogenesis and spermatogenesis. Like I told you earlier on, there are a number of processes that demands your attention as you prepare for exams. So you need to know gametogenesis is the formation of gametes by meiosis. That word by meiosis is important. Without meiosis, gametogenesis or formation gametes won't form, or the formation of gametes will not occur. So gametogenesis is the formation of gametes by meiosis. Then we look at the types of gametogenesis. So we have male gametes formed by by spermatogenesis. So male gametes are formed by spermatogenesis, while female gametes are formed by oogenesis. So these are the two types of gametogenesis. We have spermatogenesis in males and then oogenesis in female. Now, what are gametes? Since the definition of gametogenesis involves the use of the word gametes. What are gametes? Gametes are specialized cells, also called reproductive cells. And there are two types. We have sperm cells and ovum, and they are involved in sexual reproduction. These, uh, these terms are also found in meiosis. Do not also forget that spermatogenesis leads to the production of sperm cells by meiosis, and then oogenesis results in the formation of ovum. The plural form of the word ovum is ova, and it also occurs uh, by meiosis in its formation. So these are the areas we need to concentrate on. Do not ignore some of the highlighted areas because those are some of the areas you are tested in exams under multiple choice or terminology or choosing a column. All right, so here we have spermatogenesis. You have to refer to the exams guide, page 10. And over there, you need to be able to describe it. You don't explain, just describe it as it is. So I will encourage you to memorize it. It starts this way: under the influence of testosterone, diploid cells in the seminiferous tubules of the testes undergo meiosis. And then you end by saying to form haploid cells. Just three steps, three lines, and then you are done. So make sure you do your best, memorize these steps or this process of gametogenesis very well. Follow the exams guide. It is written there. Learn it as it is. In exams, you might be told to describe the process of spermatogenesis, or they will just require you to describe how sperm cells are formed. The formation of sperm cell is the same as spermatogenesis. And once you are told to describe it, describe means write the steps, write it as it is. You don't have to uh, tell us your opinion. You write it the same way as it appears in the exams guide. Then we look at the structure and the functions of parts of a sperm cell. And here are the following parts. So, in looking at the sperm cell, as a result of spermatogenesis, we have to remember to label the head, okay, with the haploid nucleus and the acrosome. So, we have the head, and inside the head, we have the haploid nucleus and acrosome. And then we have the middle portion. Don't label it as a neck, or don't call it neck. We call it the middle portion with mitochondria. And then lastly, we have the long tail. Do not call it a tail or label it as a tail. You have to label it as a long tail. And there are good reasons to label it as a long tail because the tail can sometimes be short. And there are consequences if the tail is short. And there are also advantages if the tail is long. So this is the structure of a sperm cell. So you need to know how to label. It consists of three parts: the head, the middle body, middle section or middle portion, and the long tail. So You need to also know the individual functions. Most textbooks they label it as a tail, like you have it on your screen. But for examination's sake, do not label it as a tail. You have to label it as a long tail. You have to know the functions. Acrosome contains enzyme to digest the wall of the ovum for fertilization. We have the nucleus, which contains 23 chromosomes, hence it is haploid. And then we have mitochondria, is there to provide energy for swimming. We have the long tail, and the long tail is used for swimming. So you must learn how to draw. In exams, you can be made to draw. You draw it from the scratch. Whenever you draw, you give it a title, give it a caption or a heading, and then you draw. The drawing will give you 1 mark. The caption also, you're going to get marks in any 3 marks. It depends on the structure of the question. So you can get a minimum 4, maximum 5 marks just for drawing. So, like I said, we don't call it a tail. Make sure you label it as a long tail. Okay, so like I told you earlier on, you have to know how the general marking goes when it comes to dealing with the sperm cell. Uh, you have to use a pencil to draw, use a ruler to label it. 2 marks are generally allocated to each structural adaptation of the sperm. 1 mark for the part or structure, and a second mark for the role it play. So when you are describing the adaptation or suitability of the sperm cell to perform its function, you need to be specific. If the question is about movement, you need to identify which parts of the sperm cell are involved in movement. So here is a generalized table showing you the generalized parts and the structural design or adaptation or suitability of the sperm cell to carry its function. So we have the acrosome. Why do you have an acrosome there? Because it contains enzyme to dissolve a path into the ovum. Why should the tail be long? Why shouldn't it be short? If the tail is long, it enables the sperm cell to swim efficiently and faster to the ovum. So that is the reason why the tail is long. The length or the structural adaptation answers the question as to why the sperm cell is designed that way, and there is a reason. In the reason is in it is actually in its function. So if you look at the third one, we look at mitochondria. I suppose the middle piece is supposed to contain mitochondria, but then over here they've written in dealing with the adaptation, he stated that the middle piece consists of many mitochondria. Why the word many? Okay, if the mitochondria can be many, they can also be few. That is, if you think in that direction. So why should there be many mitochondria in the middle piece? It is to provide more energy for the for sperm for the sperm movement. Few mitochondria means less amount of energy. More mitochondria means more energy for sperm production. So that's how you approach the adaptation. Now let's look at some scenario, and we try to answer question on how a structure is adapted to its function. So look at a situation here. The female reproductive system has an acidic environment with millions of phagocytes, white blood cells, to provide immunity against pathogens or any harmful proteins. Sperm cells are usually destroyed by this mechanism, by this system. So, you are supposed to explain how the male reproductive system is adapted to ensure a successful fertilization. So, explain how the male reproductive system is adapted to ensure that the sperm cells won't be killed by these pathogens so that fertilization can be successful. A successful fertilization means a reproduction will occur or take place. So, here is how you answer it. The female reproductive system is equipped with, that's the male reproductive system is equipped with the following. All right, so we are still looking at the situation here. That is explanation on how a structure is adapted to its function. So let's look at a scenario here. The female reproductive system has an acidic environment with millions of phagocytes or white blood cells to provide immunity against pathogens or any harmful proteins. Sperm cells are usually destroyed by this mechanism. So now, explain how the male reproductive system is adapted to ensure a successful fertilization. So, how is the male reproductive system designed to overcome this uh, challenge of the sperm cell being destroyed by the phagocyte or white blood cells? Because once the white blood cell destroys the sperm cells, no fertilization will occur. No fertilization occurring means there will be no reproduction taking place. So, first and foremost, the male reproductive system is equipped with one, we have the prostate gland, which secretes an alkaline fluid that neutralizes the acidic environment of the vagina. And then we have the seminal fluid, which supplies the sperm cells with nutrients and energy. And then the Cowper's gland secretes a mucous fluid that promotes the movement of the sperm. The sperm itself has a long tail which enables it to swim faster to fertilize the ovum. And the middle piece is packed with many mitochondria for the release of energy for efficient movement or mobility. So you can actually tell, in as much as the female reproductive system is designed to protect itself, the male reproductive system is also adapted structurally or designed to overcome the situation of the issue of the sperm cells being destroyed. So this is how we approach it. Okay, the approach to an adaptation deals with taking the structure, and then you explain why it is designed that way to contribute to the overall functions of the organ or the system. Then we go to oogenesis. So for oogenesis, also refer to the exams guide, page 10. And over there, you need to be able to describe it as it is. And it starts by saying diploid cells in the ovary undergo mitosis to form numerous follicles. Then, at the onset of puberty and under the influence of FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, one cell inside the follicle enlarges and undergoes meiosis. Of the four cells that are produced, only one survives to form a mature haploid ovum. So just four lines have simplified it. Make sure you go to the exams guide, page 10, memorize it, stick to the information. If you are demanded to describe it, write it as it is. Description means write the steps. Don't add your explanation and opinion to it. How it needs to be done is already written, it's already stated. So um, just just memorize it as much as you can. Well, now oogenesis leads to the formation of the ovum. And like I said earlier on, there are two diagrams. In most cases, you might be made to draw a label. One is the sperm cell, and the other one is the structure of an ovum. Or it can be drawn for you, and it's now left for you to label. If you're required to draw, don't forget to give it a title, and then you just draw it, and then you label any three parts. So here we have the follicle cells, we have the nucleus, cytoplasm, and a layer of jelly. So, and there are only three parts that you need to state the functions with regards to the ovum. We have the jelly layer, the haploid nucleus, and then we have the cytoplasm as it appears on your screen. So those are the main parts you need to know. Then we go on to the functions. So the jelly layer, what does it do? It provides protection for the early developmental stages of the fertilized ovum. So the jelly layer provides protection. What about the cytoplasm? It provides nourishment. That is, it nourishes the ovum. Nourishes means supplying uh, it with food and nutrients. What about the haploid nucleus? Contains 22 autosomes and one sex chromosome. That is specifically X chromosome. So just three parts, three things, and three functions. Make sure you memorize. Functions also demands you state it as it is. That means you shouldn't ignore to know about these functions as you prepare. Now, when it comes to the drawing, you have to develop a unique skill to approach it. You must be able to draw and label the ovum and the sperm cell, like I said earlier on, and you have to practice it. So we have a question like draw a label diagram of an ovum, and here only 3 marks are located. So when you are required to draw the ovum, is the simplest compared to the sperm cell. You just draw 3 circles, a larger and a smaller one at the center. Just any 3 circles will do. That is big, bigger, biggest. So you draw a tiny small circle that will represent the nucleus. Then you draw the second, a slightly larger circle that represents the cytoplasm, and then the outer circle that represents the jelly layer. So you also have on your screen the marking guide. We have 1 mark for correct diagram, and then you have 2 marks for any two correct labels, giving you three. So 3 marks might be the minimum. You can even go higher than the 3 marks, as high as much as five. Now you can give it a try. There you have an activity on your screen. Draw and label the sperm cell and ovum. So that is for 5 marks. And then the next one deals with state the functions of the jelly layer, acrosome, and then also we have the mitochondria. So you're just stating the function, just give it a try. And then lastly, describe how the sperm cell is adapted for its functions. So stating the functions with regards to the adaptation will in all give you about 7 marks, and drawing will give you 5 marks. So you are looking at 12 marks on your screen. So lastly, you are looking at describe how the sperm cell is adapted for movement. So when it comes for movement, you have to concentrate on the parts that contribute to it. So here are tips that you can adopt for doing the last question. The long tail is required for movement. So for the sperm to move and to move efficiently, the tail must be very long or it must be long. So you don't say it's just a tail. So you have to say it has a long tail to facilitate fast and quick or fast or an easy movement. You can put it that way. And then secondly, movement requires energy, and the energy is generated from or is produced by mitochondria, as it is in every living system. So if you look at the structural design or the adaptation of the sperm cell, it consists of a middle piece which is also packed with many mitochondria, not few. Why many mitochondria? Many mitochondria means more energy. Few mitochondria means less energy. So you need to include it in your answer here by saying the sperm cell is adapted for movement in this way. It has a long tail to facilitate movement, for fast movement, and then the middle piece is packed with many mitochondria to supply the tail with energy for efficient movement. And then the head of the sperm itself is not a square. If you look at the head of the sperm, it is actually torpedo shaped, or we say it is streamlined, similar to that of a fish, so that it can swim through through the vagina unimpeded. So those are some of the areas we need to know when it comes to the structural design of the sperm cell. Okay, so before I end it, you need to be able to draw and label the sperm cell and the ovum. You need to remember, you need to practice it. And when you are drawing, don't make any mistake. Please include a caption. Anytime you are required to draw, give it a caption. The caption will give you a mark. And then you must draw using a pencil, and you have to label in pen. So you draw with a pencil, you label with a pen, and then the lines shouldn't cross each other or one another. So the lines should be drawn using a ruler, and let your drawing be large. At least it should fill half a page. So don't squeeze the drawing, don't draw something tiny just to save paper or something. Make it visible, and we must also write clearly so that we can actually see what you are writing. All right, so this is just a revision exercise meant to highlight some of the things you shouldn't forget and to remind you of what we have actually done in class. This is just a revision tool, as stated earlier. It is a material designed to help you to remember some of the things that you have done, you have studied already, and to sensitize you on some of the areas we normally ignore. So, as you listen and listen to it over and over again, it's going to actually help you in a great way. Now, our next phase, we'll be looking at the menstrual cycle. So, our next study will be on the menstrual cycle.